time so we can play among the stars. Come and see what war was like before the coming of Sigmar. In other words, here they are. In other words, that old world charm.
Hello, you lovely denizens of this old world, and welcome to episode 2, the true proper first episode of that old world charm. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully you've just enjoyed our very lovely intro designed by us with the beautiful voice of Steve Joll, bringing it to life. And if he's done that by the time I've done this episode, you will hopefully have enjoyed that in your dulcet ears. And if not, then, next
you can have dulcet ears.
Well, you can now. In the old world, dulcet ears is, in fact, a universal special rule. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I mean, there are 76 special rules in the old world.
I'm sure it's one of them.
Over it. It seems like it's one of them, yeah.
It's what happens when the Skaven rings the bell. The dulcet ears special rule.
Oh, it's this. Right now, we're in the middle of a Skaven civil war, so it makes sense.
Yeah, they're all got dulcet ears, just one and all. Anyway,
dulcet ears. That's why they're not.
Can't hear you. You can't hear them. That's how that works.
It's how they became a legacy army.
That's it. Anyway, I'm joined by the full triumvirate of that old world charm, that being Peter the Horus Calissimo, not the Falcon, because we're in the old world.
I don't like this.
I don't like it either, but it's the first time I've done it, and it's probably the last. And we're joined by Danny Sweet Meets McDevitt. I'm definitely going to do that one more often.
I do love this.
Oh man, I love it. It's a joke on a bunch of different levels, and I really appreciate that about it.
Also, very sexual.
And
for our listeners, Danny is a very sexual individual, so it fits perfect.
It's spot freaking on. Anyway, this is That Old World Charm. This is a podcast all about reviewing, dissecting, and helping you at home keep up with this great game of the new old world. So we're predominantly a review-based podcast. We will be reviewing any and all new content for the old world as it comes out, as we're able to rock it into your ears. And when else that isn't the case, we'll definitely be dissecting other great things, army constructions, new hot lists, where to go with disfactions, overviews, underviews, and all around views, 360 views even, to go with your dulcet ears. And anyway, there's going to be 2 parts to this bad boy. First part is lovingly coming out for you guys as you're hearing it right now. Second part is over on our Patreon, which is already up and running. And we have a patron already, guys.
What?
The Hef, number one card-holding patron, Mr. Val Heffelfinger from the Squarebase podcast himself has decided he did not like our name so much he needed to sign up to our Patreon immediately so he could tell us what he thought of it.
I don't know. That guy has too much money. I do very frivolous.
Yeah. Well, we will be having a section at the end of this show where we're going to tell you about, because we ain't here to take over by any stretch. We're here to help you keep up and be one of the great resources for our community, in addition to hopefully being entertaining as well. I mean, we're already spawning dulcet ear memes left, right, and center. It's phenomenal. The sheer powerhouse that we have. But we've also a bunch of other enormously amazing old world creators out there that I've been listening to, and I want to spruik and give them as much time a day as we can. But so for this part 1, we're literally going to be giving you guys your intro to the old world. We're going to be telling you about everything in the basic rule book. This is going to be some very high level man reads book, but it is going to be man reads book. Covering the general principles and everything in the core rulebook up until the first of the phases, that being the strategy or pseudo command phase, I guess, as we're all kind of calling it. Part 2 is going to be the 3 of us pretty much talking some shit, talking about how we're feeling about the game, what we love, what we don't love, and opening the cans of worms that have been opened by our wonderful community. And by wonderful, I mean you guys know who you are. So we're going to be talking about base size controversy, who's getting their books, at what times. I'm in Australia. Apparently people are having to wait almost another month later than everybody else to get their books. And we're going to be talking about that too. So please join us over on the Patreon. That is That Old World Charm over there if you are so inclined. Gentlemen, who's played some games since last time we did one of these? It's been about a week since we did the intro episode, which will also be up for you guys right now. Danny, you played any other games?
I played a game earlier this week. I played against Tomb Kings. I played against all right. So played against Tomb Kings. I played against Steve Trimble.
Fantastic.
40K player. Also really good because he beat me at fantasy too. So I made a pretty bad mistake. I played this Wood Elf list that's really elite, very mobile. And I forgot that monsters can't pivot until after they move.
After they move.
Yeah. So I deployed my dragon basically like in the worst possible place, facing the wrong direction. So he got taken out of the game pretty quickly. Unfortunately, he was kind of on a flight path to doom, and it was totally my fault. Like this was user error. So
I learned like a quarter of your army doing nothing and then dead.
No, you got charged by the Lone Dragon. My dragon got
okay.
Dragon v Dragon.
So you offered your 500-point dragon up on a silver platter to his dragon. Well done, Danny. Good job.
Yep, thank you. So I held for several rounds of combat against him, but him having Armor of the Ages as well as Talisman of Protection just meant that I wasn't able to push through damage. Armor of the Ages for Tomb Kings is reroll successful 2 wound rolls against that model. And
Very
then
powerful.
So full plate from the dragon for a 4-up, 5-up ward save from Talisman of Protection, 5-up regen save because it's a Tomb King. The whole model's Indomitable 4, so you can't
crumble it.
You can't crumble it very well. So it's a pretty brutal thing to try and take on, especially for Wood Elves. But I think if I would have played a little bit better and moved stuff around, I think I would have won. At the end of the game, the dragon was able to kind of run roughshod over a lot of my army. But I was able to kill everything except for the dragon and 1 block of 30 skeletons. I killed the Hierophant, so everything was crumbling still. And I ended with a few units of skirmishers and a unit of Glade Riders left.
Sounds like a close game regardless. So what about yourself, Falcon?
Oh, I didn't get any games in this week. I did help some friends through a game of Wood Elves versus Empire. And kind of coached them through that. And a game of Wood Elves versus Warriors of Chaos since we last recorded. So got to do 2, both with Wood Elves. One of them, it was kind of like a mixed Empire list with some artillery and a lot of knights and a steam tank up against Glade Guard spam.
Yep.
And I really do think Glade Guard spam is a bit of an issue. It was still only 80 Glade Guard, but it was.
I love how you said only. I love how you said only. It's disgusting.
He took the was it the Lore Familiar on like a Treeman Ancient, so it had Plague of Rust, and just like the knights would move up, and then he'd be like Plague of Rust, 1 billion poison arrow shots or arcane bodkin shots because he kind of had a mix, and the knights were just getting wiped out. Still was a very interesting game. And then the game with Chaos, it was 2 like guys who'd never. They hadn't even like really read their books yet, so it was a little bit more of a slog. So basically just helping people learn the game right now. I'd love to get some more games in. Also, a problem is, at least for me physically, is like the physical army I own without borrowing is Lizardman, and it's still under NDA, so I can't be bringing that out against my buddies. I have to play online versus other people still under that same NDA, so not getting any reps in just yet.
Fair enough. Well, let us move on to the meat and potatoes of our episode. For those following along at home, should you have your book by now? And if you are, just please know that you should be very grateful because there's so many people out there who haven't been able to get their books yet. But page 92 is where we're going to be starting this. And we are hoping that in a lot of these intro episodes, a lot of these first episodes as we're getting going are going to be mostly evergreen. So a year from now, you can watch this episode back if you want a bit of a tune-up on some of the more spicy or obscure things that are going on in this great game of the old world. But in addition, we're not going to be reading these paragraphs word by word. There are some assumptions that we're making that if you are a denizen of the old world, you know how to move a block of infantry forward. Things like that. You know what a D6 is. General principles, which is where we're going to be starting this, is not going to be covered holistically. We're going to be talking about the things that have significantly changed from over editions, or things that we think you should need to know in order to play the game to a fulfilling level. Things of the points of interest more than anything else. The first of which, starting off right here, Takebacks and changing of one's mind has been enshrined as the very first thing that you read when you start to get into how to play this game. And I adore this. This is one of the greatest things I've ever seen attached to a rule of any tabletop game or any game for that matter. And it reads as thus, and I'm going to read this verbatim because I think it's very important. It is uncommon for players of any game it's not uncommon, starting off strong, to occasionally second guess themselves, saying they are about to do something before immediately changing their mind. Players should be tolerant of this in their opponents, as they will likely do it themselves. However, once dice have been rolled for any reason or a move committed to and made, players must abide by their decision. They can't change anything that came before the dice roll or the act of. So we have very clear, defined parameters for what is and isn't acceptable. And of course, I would be even more liberal than this personally, but I love that there is a baseline benchmark that has been enshrined and committed to for the play of this game. Danny, is this as big a deal as I'm making it out to be?
I think it's pretty great. I think this should be in all Games Workshop's games rules. Maybe in all the rules of any game. Like, you don't want to get, gripondoed, right? Like, and so this kind of prevents that from happening.
Exactly right. What about yourself, Peter? Anything to add?
Yeah, no, I love that it kind of at least sets a baseline so that, and this works both ways, right? Like there's a lot in the 40K community and other communities where, you feel obligated to give takebacks in certain situations. And this kind of gives you like they say, like, you don't have to, like, this is the point in the rule book. Yeah. It's there. Technically, they already did their thing. That said, like, yes, people like me and you, Adam, and probably Danny too, gonna be a little more loose depending on the situation. Yeah. But yeah, having a firm rule in there is always great. I do love the fact that it's the first thing.
And I love the idea that I could walk up to a table and just be like, would you like to play it to the book or play it less or more than, well, you never, I would always be of the opinion you're never going to play less liberal than the book. You're playing to the book or more liberal than that. As in like, if you moved a unit, but you saw that it was just a horrific play and you decide, if you haven't, done anything else to give you knowledge or forethought, you've just like moved something else and realized, okay, there's no way these two don't block each other next turn. Do you mind if I just scoot this one back a little bit? I would, 99 times out of 100 probably just be like, yeah, just scoot him back, not a big deal. But if walk up to the table and be like, hey man, would you like to play to the book or would you like to make it a little bit more liberal? And someone says, no, I prefer to play to the book. Totally done. And we know that we're still playing a pretty reasonable game.
Yeah. Yep. There's I don't know. Yes, I agree with you. I look at this and the more I read the rule, like that second sentence, not sentence, but like the second part of that, the second clause here, or a move committed to and made. What does that mean?
As in you move the models, I'm assuming.
Yeah. But like, if you just say you're going to move them and then don't move them, I've never heard of anybody getting that upset about that. I guess if you declare a charge and then not declare a charge.
Yeah, exactly right. But you haven't rolled the charge.
Yeah.
That could be perfectly what they're describing.
For sure.
Like,
I think
I've actually decided. Yeah. I think that's a perfect example. You say you declare the charge, but you haven't rolled it. And then when you come back after you've gone through all the charges and be like, actually, second guessing, I'm probably not going to declare them now that I've thought about the rest of these. That's a perfect example. Yeah. The next of these, Peter, would you like to read it out? Moving through units, because this is actually almost brand new to Warhammer games.
Moving through units as a general rule, no unit can move through another unit, though there are exceptions. For example, a fleeing unit may be obliged to move through another unit. Alternatively, however, the corner of a unit may have no choice but to move through another unit during a maneuver. In those cases, it is acceptable for one unit to pass through another, and the rules will make allowances for this. I will say this has kind of generally been the case with fantasy where you can't move through your own units other than when fleeing. And there's always like a thing to explain, like what happens when, like it causes a panic test, or perhaps it does difficult terrain or dangerous terrain tests in the past. I guess the big add here is this concept of you can move over a corner during a maneuver. Particularly, I assume that what they're referring to mainly is the turn maneuver, where like you're supposed to be able to move, basically spin on the spot. In that case, yes, your corner can possibly bump into somebody when normally it wouldn't, because rather than moving each individual model to 90 degrees, you just flip the base. because like the only thing with that is like wheeling is also a maneuver. So by saying that, you're also saying you're allowed to wheel over units as long as it's just a corner. And then what does a corner actually refer to? Blah, blah, blah. But I think it's mainly in reference to turns. So.
Yeah, I do agree. Go, Danny.
All right. I hate to be a negative Nancy or pick this apart a little bit, but like with that, like, and you being able to like potentially wheel past, like if that's part of it, does that mean you can't block a charge, like your own charge from yourself, like because you could potentially wheel through your unit? Like,
I mean, I believe with a degree of being reasonable, like I would almost, yeah, like half the unit, can't go through the other half the other unit, stuff like that. But within being reasonable, I think like if the first inch of each corner in on the right angle, that's probably what I would degree is that like the extremities of reasonableness, right?
I agree. Well, and I think that maneuver needs to be defined a little bit better in that rule. But otherwise, I think that's a really good rule. Like it sucks if you can't rotate your unit, or like Peter said. Like I think that's the obvious intention here, right? Is that so you can't get totally boxed in.
Well, that's a tactic I used to use all the time in 8th edition. I used to railroad people, is what we used to call it. Like, I'm going to put a unit on this here, right out of your charge arc, and here, right out of your charge arc, and you have no option but going straight forward. You cannot do anything else because I've railroaded you here. I'm exactly an inch away at both, extremities of your charge arc, as in you cannot see me to charge me, but you cannot do any pivots apart from moving forward and just completely control objectives. The way people moved. It actually was a great way of controlling things with random movement as well, because you could stop them pivoting.
I definitely did that with steam tanks before in the table. Yeah,
exactly right. Steam tanks and doom wheels was a great way of doing it. And I used to do it on people's Death Stars as well, to be like, well, I can't stop you going left, but these two Saber Cats can stop you going right, and therefore you can't get my Mournfang unit, etc., etc. Which was it was a load of crap, and I didn't love doing it. But hey, back then when someone's got a 1,500 point unit, you do what you got to do.
Yeah,
as a Black Knight buses and stuff like that back in 8th edition. The next section here goes over measurements directly towards, directly away. We probably don't need to discuss much of there. And then we go on to talk about dice, the different dices that you will use playing a game, D6s, D3s, artillery and scatter dice. That's all very self-explanatory stuff. The next time we get to something that I think people will need to know is modifying dice rolls. Dan, you want to read this out for people and tell people why it's, poignant?
Yeah, sure. So to modify a dice roll, simply roll the dice and then add or subtract the modifiers down, shown, effectively changing the results of the roll. If the rules instruct you to divide a dice roll, any fractions are rounded up unless the rules state otherwise. Modifiers are applied after division or multiplication. So if you're multiplying a dice roll or having a dice roll, that happens before other penalties or additions are taken to it. So I think this would count for if something was like half damage, right? And you shot them with a cannon that was D3 +1 damage. The +1 is a modifier.
Yep.
Yeah. So you would have the D3 and then plus the 1.
And then add the 1 to it. Yep.
Yeah. And that's probably exactly the most common place we're going to see this come up. There is a possible negatives to leadership and pluses to leadership. That could, I don't know if there's any half leadership or half the result of break test, stuff like that. But that's another thing, another characteristic or thing that I could see possibly working into the game somewhere. Peter, any other examples or anything, other insights here?
Not that I can really think of right now. No.
Easy done. Then goes into natural rolls, rolling off, re-rolls. It's all pretty self-explanatory. Also, then, unless you guys know of anything else. Sorry, was that a pause?
Yeah,
there,
here's
Danny?
something I just thought of. Okay. All right. So I have a character with a multi-wound weapon and the Laurels of Victory, which lets me double my combat resolution for wounds that are caused.
Yep.
Is that so? Do I do every wound I do with my 2 damage weapon is done? Do I get? And obviously, if
that's not a dice roll, right? You're not doubling.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's not that. Yeah, okay, never mind. But if it was a D3, then yeah, okay.
Yeah. All right. Next topic here is templates and the way templates have changed. Now, not a lot has changed with the placing of templates, apart from the fact you no longer have the choice on where on the movement the unit you place the template. It used to be you could place the template directly over the head of any single model in a unit. And a lot of people used to do that to try and get a good scatter onto something more poignant. Some people tried to scatter into combat,
Or-
stuff like this.
We're trying to get a character with the hole
Exactly.
into the template. Yeah.
Yep, we used to do that all the time. Are you cool? You've got a super character. The best way I can kill that guy is a strength 10 hit under the hole of the template, and so I'm going to put 4 rock lobsters on it from in the orc army, etc. Probably not 4, but you know what I mean. But now, how does this change things? How does this change things that we have to put it over the exact center? Can we jank that by having units of a certain width and depth in order to minimize template placement or maximize it, so to speak? And does this drastically change the value of templates in this game, Peter?
Well, I think what drastically changes the value of templates more than like not being able to target out where you like, which is got more of I think a smaller downgrade in the grand scheme of things. Although yes, character sniping was always amazing, especially with like a grudge thrower or something. I hate it. But now it's the partial hits, the risk of being hit, that they call it in this. I think that's actually the change that really lowers the value of having template weapons in your army. They're still quite good, certain ones in particular, especially if they have like a secondary effect for causing a wound or hitting.
Yep.
But like the amount of wounds that they do is drastically lowered now because of that.
Exactly right. So you're speaking to the fact that if a model isn't entirely covered by the template, they'll only be hit on a 4+. And we do know that base sizes have generically increased, and therefore the number of units you're going to hit with a 3 or a 5-inch template has gone down already. And then the amount of models underneath them is only applicable on a 4+ for the majority of what is hit. So it's actually like it's almost a threefold downgrade. You no longer get to place the template wherever you want on the unit. The size of the units have increased, as in the footprint of the units, so there's going to be less under them. There's no longer getting 13, 14 plus night goblins under a template. Even though I'm not even sure if their base size has changed. I shouldn't speak that crap. They have. They have. Awesome. So there's less night goblins. Cool. I was perfect. And then when you do put it on there, like 50%, it's a minimum of 25% less, right? Almost.
Yeah. So, like as an example, models that have gone from a 25 mil to a 30 mil base, if they have an odd number of models in that front rank, a direct hit is only going to get one guaranteed hit.
Correct.
And then everything else is on a 4-up.
Conditional. Yeah, exactly right. So really,
and then it's different too, depending on whether they're 6 wide or an odd or even number of models wide.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? Because then if it's 6 wide, then it changes things because now you're placing it between 2 models, so you'll actually get 2 guys. Yeah. It's almost better, like if you're going up against templates, to be odd modeled, especially if you're 30 mil versus a 25 mil. Like there's a lot there. So
in my head, and this is giving away some part 2 content, I'm already making a case for why I like organ guns, Hellblaster volley guns more than template weapons now, more than like your grudge throwers, your stone throwers. Even though you have to, and me and Danny were speaking about this in the chat, even though you have to roll to hit, at least you're one less term and condition away from your hits. You still have to roll to hit with the freaking templates now. So all you're doing is it's the same thing, but you're moving the failure point of the scatter dice. And it's virtually the same thing, as long as you can see them, of course, which is,
we can talk about it later, but I have lots of counters to your argument here. So
it's fair. This was just one argument of being like, maybe we go this direction more than the rock lobsters now and the trebuchets. And then of course we're going to have some interplay there.
That makes you feel better. The dwarf list that I just wrote has 2 working guns and 1 cannon for War Machine. So
suck it, Danny. You proved my point. Never mind. Adam 1, Danny 0.
Listen, as a guy that played more than I played almost a dozen Warriors of Chaos games in practice. And Danny got to experience what my Hell Cannon did for 2 of those games. Like I cannot explain to you how angry I am about templates now, particularly the Hell Cannon.
Is it still a 5-incher?
No, it's a 3-incher. Okay. And it has 2 ways to misfire every turn. So in my first 3 games using it, it misfired 11 times.
Mate. Do you know how many small violins? Do you know how many small violins just got cracked out of cases for the Hell Cannon?
It also
nobody.
It did a total of I think 3 wounds over the first 3 games. One of which was to one of my own models. Like it was not good.
I see this as an absolute win.
Adam, it's a 220 point model. Like, come on.
Cool.
It should
Don't
do
take
something.
it. F the Hell Cannon. No sympathy for the Hell Cannon. None. Zero. Let's make Warriors of Chaos players have to take the Hell Cannon. At least one.
Yeah, it's just a 1+ now. Yeah.
1+. It must take it. You don't have to take Warriors of Chaos Warriors anymore. You have to take the Hell Cannon. Anyway,
it's Hell Cannons of Chaos. That's the name of the book.
Yeah, it's the name of the book. All right, model profiles. This is all self-explanatory stuff. GW has aligned the vast majority of their profiles and data sheets. Are all pretty ubiquitous. Movement, web skill, bliss skills, strength, toughness, etc., etc. This is no different to what we've seen in previous editions, and nothing here, I believe, will surprise anybody unless you guys know different.
I don't believe so, but we should go back for a second because I don't think we fully explained the partial hits thing.
Sure.
I just realized that, and I apologize for throwing us off the rails right away. But for the people listening at home, yes, anything that isn't directly under the center of a template now when it's hit, and this is for the round templates, or is only partially covered, and that could be like 90% covered. On a 4+, it gets hit now instead of a 1 to 3. So when we're talking about like frontages and stuff being more important, it can be, especially like with the even numbered. I said it like more will be under the template itself, but also if you're even numbered, a direct hit, the center of the template will be on 2 models rather than 1. So you're guaranteed, that strength 8 or strength 10 hit with multiple wounds generally on 2 guys rather than on 1. So that's all stuff to think about. But the partial hits really does kind of lower the strength of like flame templates and everything else. And we've seen a change to how flame templates work, which we'll probably talk about later as well. So.
Easy done. Suffice to say, though, the scatter and artillery dice still work virtually the same, with the exception being, speaking about it now, the vast majority of the times the artillery dice number of hits is not number of hits now. You have to think about it as number of shots, and then you have to roll the hit. Yeah. Other model information, points, values, troop types, base sizes, etc. Base sizes. So can of worms we will discuss. Armor values have slightly changed. I suppose it's a good time to talk about it. It used to be that there was a kind of addition subtraction kind of metric you had to go through when building a unit. As in, like, okay, so we're going to have light armor. Let's upgrade it to heavy armor, so they get to a 5+. Then they'll take a shield to a 4+. Then they'll be on a horse for a 3+, and that horse will have barding for a 2+, etc., etc. That's no longer generally the case. There are some times where you will get pluses, like a shield still pluses, but you can't really get that huge tracking of automatically adding to armor saves. Like a mount doesn't automatically add to an armor save anymore, right? But there are some cases where it does. I believe it's like it's natural armor 1, or there's some.
Yes. So there's an armored hide special rule, and there's the barding special rule. And then a couple other armies have special barding, high elves, for example, that may give us a modified to that. But yes, barding is an additional +1 to your armor save if you have a mount that has it. And then the armored hide special rule gives you a bonus to your armor save equal to whatever's in the bracket. And I don't think I've seen anything greater than armored hide 2, but I could be wrong there.
That's as far as I've seen as well. Anything else in either of those that we need to speak to, gentlemen?
Troop types are very important when we cover things like ranks and unit strength. I will be talking unit strength later on this episode, so we can cover it then. But troop types are very valuable, and they have special rules assigned to them, although not universal in some cases. Mainly, though, the big thing for troop types is going to be like how it affects your rank. And how it affects your unit strength.
Correct. And that is exactly into our next section here on forming units. So, I mean, we all know what a rank and flank game, although a really good way of changing the rank and flank terminology is to rank and file now, because it's going to be very impactful to having a rank bonus and having a bunch of other things. How far you can move, how far you can march, how far you can wheel, etc., etc. Are you able to give us a TLDR of this page for us, Danny? Because there are quite a few words here.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So basically when you form a unit, all the ranks and files have to be lined up square. So you can't have them offset or anything like that. And the back rank is the only rank that can have less models than any of the other preceding rank. So the front has to be full, and then the second rank, if it's possible for it to be full, has to be full, etc., etc. And that only is not the case with like basically the lance formation, I think.
Yep.
And then so most units adopt a particular combat order. So there's close order, open order, and skirmishers are basically the three types of unit formations that people can have. There might be other ones that are army specific, like the lance formation, Bretonia, for example. But there's not many other ones. And this basically determines, and you have two different ways you can be in combat order or marching column. Combat order is where you're wider than you are deep, whereas marching column is where you're deeper than you are wide. Marching column, if you're in that, you don't get a rank bonus, which I'll get into in a minute. But you do get to triple your movement when you do a march move, which is a specific type of move. If you're in combat order for close order and also open order, you're going to get a rank bonus, and the rank bonus is each full rank that you have, or not full rank, but each rank that meets the minimum rank size. So that depends on your unit type. Can claim a rank bonus up to 2. There are some other rules that allow you to claim additional bonuses for rank, like Horde, for example. But that's how you can get that rank bonus.
Perfect. And when you said as wide as you are deep, so as many ranks as you have files is what they've denoted it here as the language they want us to use. How does that really guide you into army construction, Peter? Just as a quick aside.
The real big thing it does is it kind of impacts like how you think about frontages a lot more than it used to be. Combined with the fact that, when you think about close combat and what does get to fight, and that's really about it. I've found, at least so far, with a few exceptions, smaller unit sizes have felt better. Like outside of Tomb Kings or vampires or armies like that have like an unstable special rule or something to that effect. Or if you have like Unbreakable or something. And so it does make it a little more interesting trying to balance that rank and file. And the unit types as well, because some of them now, it's not just 5 and 3. There are some unit types that give you a rank at 4, or that give you a rank at, I don't think any of them are 2. But you have like 5, 4, and 3, and so you can create some scenarios for yourself where you really have to think through how you're going to change your formation to deal with terrain. You have a very heavy terrain table without going into marching column, unless like you really want to, because of the penalties that marching column applies. Like as Danny said, marching column is this other formation you can take if you are thinner than you are, if you are thinner than you are long, or longer than you are. God damn it. Yeah. Yes. If you're deeper than you are wide. My God, Peter.
Just use their terminology. Everyone just start using ranks and files. If you have less ranks than you have files.
Yes. Sure.
Yes.
I don't even think that's true. But so marching column, the penalties to taking marching column is that you cannot make a charge move, and you can't claim rank bonuses. And unless you have a special rule like drilled, that can really, you're basically going in marching column is going to keep you from making a charge or doing a lot of the things you want to do with a lot of the more important units in your army. Like for more than one turn, it's taking you out of the game longer. So you do have to consider that, especially with more elite units, where your ranks and files are smaller.
Yeah, just for an example, are you saying that, let's say I was to deploy my army, let's say I think I'm aggressive and I think my army is stronger than yours and I want to get to you. I deploy my army in marching columns, and then I march directly to my opponent and the start of and then I deploy for combat order thereafter. So I just try and bridge the gap, but you don't want to stay in that and get charged is what you're saying.
Exactly. Not unless you have a rule like drilled or like a special reform rule that a couple of units have, what's that high elf unit that I hate? Lothern Seaguard that can reform. They can redress their ranks after they've been charged. Things like that. Oh,
Yeah.
and they get to shoot when they do that too, right? They can shoot and then
Yes.
reform. What a bunch of baloney. Get out of here. Sorry.
This is legitimately one of the most significant changes to here, and one of the biggest ways of having skill expression. Because it used to be in 8th edition and some previous editions that it didn't matter. It's either you were a unit that killed things or a unit that just had steadfast. That was the only two things that mattered. Like you had your unit of 4 demigriff knights in a single rank, or blood crushers, or whatever, insert brutal monster cav unit. Or you had 120 Skaven slaves in as long as the table. And they were just there to stay there as long as possible and be steadfast stubborn. And they would get as a rank bonus of +3 for the entire time that had 3 or more ranks, which was the entire freaking game, unless you disrupted it. Whereas now there is a lot of nuance to the ranks, the files, how deep, what formation you are in on what turns of the game. Like when you decide to change, if you do, there is definitely a lot of skill expression and mastery to be had of here. And it's going to really be unique to different armies as well. I think this is one of the fundamental and really exciting parts of the new edition as well. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you think all this is a good thing? Do you think these are good changes?
I just can't. All right. Full disclosure. I can't see a point in time in which I would ever use marching column.
I'll give you one.
Okay.
Just for you to have. So let's say you take a unit of chosen Chaos Knights with the drilled ability, 12 of them. You run them 3 wide, 4 deep. You march them turn 1, 24 inches, I believe. Angle them slightly if you need to. So maybe you go 22 and angle. On your next turn, because they have the drilled special rules, so they can reform. You declare your charge because you're allowed to declare a charge. It specifies that in the chart who can charge. It says units that are in marching formation can declare a charge, even if they can't move. And the reason being is because of drilled. So then you've done marching column. You do your thing. You say, I'm going to declare a charge on that guy. When it comes to the charge move, you use drilled to reform rank, redress your ranks for free. So now you're 6 wide. And now you're allowed to charge, and you got, that extra bunch of movement. I think that's really the only scenario where I would use marching column, unless I was playing against wood elves or someone who can, summon 3 or 4 extra woods, and it's going to screw up my whole thing anyway. Yeah. Like that would be.
And there's pretty much no reason to not just try and get on top of them as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Those are the things. I thought about dwarves as another example, but I haven't played any games.
Yeah.
Of just being like, okay, one more turn of getting shot could just be backbreaking, so I might as well sacrifice that one turn. Like hope he doesn't charge me back and just go get in his face.
If a unit has drilled, then yeah, okay, I agree with you that that's probably a pretty decent combination. But otherwise, like it just doesn't make any sense to me, because if I march twice, or if I marched once, I'm still going to be in a good position to charge, especially with the best cavalry unit like Chaos Knights, right? If I move 21 inches with Chaos Knights into my opponent's face, I am probably going to be close enough to them where they can start moving out of my line of sight.
As in, you'll be closer than you need to be.
Yeah, like I think it's okay to be a little bit further away. Like your threat range is very far.
Yeah, that's fair. The threat range for cav versus the threat range for infantry is like extremely different.
Huge.
It's hugely different. It's almost. Is it 50? It's 50% better usually, right? At least. Movement 4, movement 8, 50%. Yeah. And so you're absolutely right. 100% better.
The thing I would say is that yes, normally, but if you are able to get an easy flank, because redress works both ways, right? So with drilled, let's say you don't start in marching column, you actually move up first, you jockey, your opponent starts to jockey, and then on turn 2, you use drill to actually put yourself in marching column, and then now you march 24 inches and you still have a turn. And now you're like right alongside your whole opponent's flank, right? Like in their backfield.
Yeah. Well, this is the other thing I was thinking of. For getting behind your opponent and or like maneuvering out of whatever they're trying to set up, I feel like it's got some merits
I can
as
see
well.
That.
Yeah. But like Danny, I'm not arguing that I find marching column hard to get around without that. It's, to me, I feel like it's Otherwise, it's going to be terrain based. You're going into marching column because it's a heavy terrain table, or you're up against wood elves and they've created a bunch of impassable forests, and you're just like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go one wide and snake my way along for a little bit.
And look, one of the things about marching column is you're not worried about getting charged by wood elves, right? Oh no, the Glade Guard charged me. Oh, I don't have my ranks. They're all dead anyway. Who cares? There are some things where you're just like, I'm not that afraid of my opponent's, counter assault ability, counter charge ability. So yeah, I could see some situations, but I agree with you, Danny. The more I read about it, the more I think about it, I'm like, some niche situations. I was more alluding to the fact that people just trying to figure out what is right for their meta by like how wide they need to be. Like if I'm playing Empire into a very heavy elf meta, as in most of my units are going to hit second, I need to think about being way wider than they are so that I actually get to hit them back.
Yeah,
so they can't just butcher a front rank and have no step up and no interplay.
100%, you're right. Like you need to really think about that stuff. I've been really thinking about how wide I feel comfortable going with units.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like before, I think that they're probably unmaneuverable.
Exactly.
Like 250 millimeters, I think, is as wide as I want to go.
Fair. How many conventional infantry, like how many state troopers would that be in a front rank, you reckon?
That's 10. That's a horde.
10.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
10.
And because once you're that wide, you are really susceptible to being misdirected. You're really susceptible to just like getting in your own way and all sorts of other nonsense, or just
And something that's come up, and when we kind of talk more about the charge phase in future episodes, there's no more freewheel in the charge phase,
right?
And that, for me, has been the biggest cause of grief in all my games when it's coming to charges. I will measure out a charge. It happened in one of my games against Danny. You measure out a charge. You're within, you're kind of just on the right angle where they're barely in your front, so you can declare a charge against that unit. You measure it out. It's like it's a 7-inch charge. Previous editions, you just roll a 7 and you're in, right?
Yep.
Now, because there's no free wheel, depending on your angle when you get that, like that isn't a 7-inch charge, because unless your opponent lets you charge on a diagonal, like you're gonna have to lose 3 or 4 inches for that wheel. And then that might cause you to bump into a unit, whereas before you would have been able to perform that free wheel at any time during your move, right? Like, it just creates a whole lot of weird scenarios, I find.
But this is a reason that I think cavalry has been buffed in this edition, because they just have less issues with the movement values. Just being faster just seems to be a very good place to be. We're going to quickly talk about disrupted units. I'm going to read this out verbatim because it's a very important facet of the game. Disruption represents a unit having lost some of its cohesion. A unit becomes disrupted if it is engaged in the flank or rear by an enemy unit with a unit strength of 5 or more. We're about to go to that section now. And it ends. Sorry, the second dot point is it ends its move with a quarter, 25% or more of its models within difficult terrain, possibly forests, or if it's straddling a low linear obstacle. So that would be a ruined wall or some kind. A disrupted unit cannot claim a rank bonus. Note that every skirmisher, so that enemy skirmishers do not cause disruption. So if you are charged by a skirmish unit, that they are not closed order or opened order, or lance. They, even if they have a higher unit strength, they won't disrupt you, which I think is a nice little change. You can't get flanked by just a cloud of nonsense chameleon skinks.
Well, not just that. There are some really hefty skirmish units.
Really,
a lot of units that used to not be skirmish that now have the option to either pay for or have the skirmish for free. That are pretty chunky, and it's something your opponent might miss. Like when they make their list, they might not, because that's just like one of those little extra italicized things. And all of a sudden, your opponent hits you with a squad of like 20 marauders that are in skirmish formation, and you're just like, okay, well, they don't do anything. They still do stuff, but like they're not going to disrupt you.
You're not going to be happy about it, but they're not going to cause your unit to just like leg it immediately.
Can I complain about something right here?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this
space, Peter.
Thank you, guys. So this forming units thing, and it tells us about close order formation, which is super cool. And we didn't say it, but like close order formation also in close combat compared to the other formations, gives you an additional +1 to combat res,
Yep.
which is great compared to the other two. But they decided, for whatever reason, when they wrote this book, that the other formations should be elsewhere.
Yes, I don't know why. Do not know why they're all just next to each other.
And it's the dumbest thing, particularly because like Skirmisher falls under special rules, the universal special rules. Open Order is, I believe, in 2 places in the universal special rules and in a rule section called like other weird stuff. I think is something to that effect, or
exactly
oddball situations.
Exactly what it's called.
And so why did you put it there? We have this perfect spot to just add an extra paragraph. Here's one order. Here's the other one. And then skirmishers are their own thing. You can find them in special rules. Like, this is crazy pants, because they even talk about this disrupted units thing, but disrupted units, a big chunk of that also doesn't apply to Open Order or skirmishers. So it's another thing where it's like, well, why? Like, just get out of here.
Just put it all next to each other.
Put it all with each other, guys. Then you can make it, like, learn how to write a book. You did so good with these rules. They're so beautiful and they make sense. But like, put the stuff together that's supposed to be together, please, for the love of God. I'm turning to my grandmother. I'm like waving my hand in front of my book right now. You guys, you don't even see it.
Yep. Moving on to removing casualties. The vast majority of this is very self-explanatory. Usually you know, almost unless it's a character, usually always you will remove models from the back rank of the unit just because it saves you from knocking over all your models when something dies. But the thing that needs to be added here is, of course, this is made all the rounds on the internet for this. There is no stepping up at the moment. I'll read this verbatim. Stepping forward. Although models are removed from the back of their unit, very often casualties will have fallen elsewhere, usually in the front or fighting rank. Removing models from the back of a unit represents warriors behind the front rank stepping forward. However, a model cannot make any form of attack, shooting, or combat during a phase in which it stepped forward. It is too busy clambering over fallen bodies of its comrades. This is a dramatic change, and it is going back to, you know, rules that we have seen many years ago in various, you know, fantasy games, ranked and flank games. Is this a dramatic change to the game to you two gentlemen who have played them, Danny?
Yeah, I mean, this is very different than 8th, right? 8th kind of removed this rule. So it's kind of a trip back to 7th, 6th edition.
Yeah.
Where people just got to fight, right? Like, regardless, everybody fights all the time. So
is this good for the game? Does this make for a good experience?
I think yes and no. There's advantages and disadvantages to this, right? I think it kind of helps units that are a little bit more fragile but elite to stay alive a little bit longer if they can kill their enemy before they get to fight. I mean, that's obviously the benefit here. But I also think that it hurts units that are maybe not as good, like crappier units. They suffer for this, right? Because they get killed more often, and their attacks are even less influential than the ones from elite units. So those units tend to look a lot better.
As soon as I read this, my first instinct and my gut knee-jerk reaction, and many people in the community have had this also, was that, oh, well, okay, initiative's the only thing that matters now. Initiative has been supercharged because fighting first means kill, you know, before your opponent means killing their front rank and taking just fundamentally less damage. And so just getting to a break point where more often than not you kill more than half of their front rank just means that you lose. The churn and the grind is starting heavily weighted in your favor. They have combated this at several instances by, you know, giving you initiative bonuses on the charge in order to bring some interplay back into the game because of that. And I think that was an extremely good thing. But I worry that people will get to a very high level of the game and realize there is an initiative breakpoint. That means these units get to play and these units don't. And I fear for that down the track. Of course, narratively and all that stuff, it ain't going to matter. It's just a bit of fun. But Peter, does that hold any weight with you, or do you think this is unwarranted fears?
I don't know if it's I think there's a handful of units that are bad now because of this, but I think the fight phase in general is better for it, at least the way they have built these rules. Like things like steadfast not being a thing, step up not being a thing. It really does. It does make these elite units feel better. And I want elite units to feel better.
feel
Like
good. Yeah.
I want to be able to run my whatever chosen chaos warriors instead of my regular chaos warriors and feel like I'm actually like there's a reason why I'm spending that extra 6 points.
It's a meaningful difference.
Right.
Yeah.
Or my shock cavalry units. I'm spending 40 points a model for these guys. And when I hit my opponent, and then all they do is just say like, okay, you're going to kill 12 of my dudes. That's fine. I've got 28 more and they're all going to hit you next.
Yeah.
Getting rid of that, the change goes, it swings the other way. That said, in my experience in my games, for the most part, like if you build knowing that your weaker units need support, like further than like I'm just going to take a block of 40 dudes.
Correct.
If you put a character or two in them to help with that combat res, if your opponent isn't smart enough to realize like they have to kill out the champion, otherwise the champion will always get to fight. Little things like that let you like at least get some kind of clap back. I find the rank bonus being only +2 with exception of if you have horde or flanks and rears. I feel like that's the thing that weakens the game a little bit more for these like big blobs. That said, I'm beginning to appreciate more some of the more expensive banners that I kind of didn't appreciate early. A lot of the combat res banners that are out there, there's a lot of them that are specific to certain factions, are very expensive. But they're perfect for these kind of like large blob units.
And what you're talking about there is like, I remember distinct cases of like charging, my gut star of, 900 plus points, 3 characters, 8 plus iron guts into, 40, 50 halberdiers, killing half the unit and then proceeding to lose for the remainder of the game, like actually losing my gut star to halberdiers with a warrior priest. Because I would go in and I'd kill half the unit, I'd have all the impact hits, I'd prop my breath weapons, all that stuff. And then I would just get ground out with a far more elite unit, far more expensive unit, because they would be in horde formation fighting in 3 ranks and just constantly stepping up, maybe with an archlector because they were fancy pants lads at the time. And that kind of stuff is just going to happen a lot less. Your elite units are going to feel far more elite. I suppose actually that was a bad example, seeing as my unit was fighting second anyway, but it still holds water. There's plenty of examples of similar things where units that should feel very elite got ground out by stuff that just had steadfast for days and or stubborn and just too many bodies for you to handle.
I mean, you look at like elf infantry or something like that. Like you could never fight those units.
You just couldn't fight them. You couldn't fight them. You had what, Phoenix Guard with a 3-up whatever invulnerable save, and you're just like, well, I'll go in and kill 4 dudes and die over the next 4 turns because I'll never kill more than 4 dudes. And so that's just stuff always just felt kind of bad. The next section is models and unit facing. This is relatively self-explanatory as far as I can tell from previous iterations of similar games, unless there's something here that I've missed, gents. But the section we need to talk about here is line of sight.
Can we talk about one thing, Adam? I'm sorry. Multiple wound models, because this has changed between editions, so I think we should probably address it.
Yep, sure.
Like you lose wounds from multiple wounds. It's not a wound pool or anything like that you're pulling models from. Like you're capped by killing models. So like if you have a multiple wound 2 weapon and you into 3 wound ogres, you're only going to kill 1 ogre per 2 hits, not do 4 damage to like 2 ogres.
They're no splash over. Yeah, no carryover. Yeah. That's a great point out. Peter, anything you want to break down line of sight for us? Feel free to read out as much as you think is necessary.
Line of sight. Okay. You'll often need to determine if one model or unit has a line of sight to another. To check line of sight, stoop down to look from the model's point of view. If a straight uninterrupted line can be drawn from within the model's vision arc, which they show some pictures of, it's basically a 45-degree arc from your from the front of your base to any part of the other model, then it's in line of sight. If no such line can be drawn to the model due to intervening terrain or without crossing over or through another model, there is no line of sight. And that's the big change here, is this models blocking line of sight. There's some other things with terrain, but in previous editions, 8th as an example, models units didn't block line of sight for things like shooting. They applied like a cover penalty, and now they fully block it. and they also do it for charges and a number of other things. There's a lot of special rules in the game now to help you ignore units for different reasons.
Mhm.
But this is a massive change to the game. To continue reading, a model is always within its own vision arc and always has line of sight to itself and its own unit. If at least one model in a unit has line of sight to at least one model from another unit, then that unit can see that other unit. In italics, note that models and units always block line of sight. Therefore, it is normally only the models in the front rank of a unit that has line of sight. And then we have obscured. So line of sight may be partially obscured by terrain features or by other models. In such case, the other model or unit is said to be in cover. To check if a model or unit is in cover, stoop down. If the other model or unit is fully visible, they are not in cover. If up to half of the other model or unit is obscured, they're in partial cover. And if more than half of the other model or unit is obscured, they're in full cover. And then they list off the benefits quite a few pages later of those things rather than
for some reason. They could have just put it here. This changes a little bit of the T's and C's of especially declaring charges. Have you noticed this in the game?
Yeah. Specifically, it makes screening like actually viable. Or at least much more viable. Things like skirmishers you can still shoot through if like there's gaps between the models, but it's probably going to give you obscured at least, if not like half obscured, so like partial cover for sure. Full cover is really easy to get. I found that shooting because I played a shooting army really for the first time that didn't like Tomb Kings ignore all penalties, so they don't give a shit about any of this. But like Wood Elves that I was playing the other night, like absolutely care about obscured line of sight. So the extra -1 or -2 even quite often was causing significant reduction in the amount of damage that I was able to do. So I've got to really kind of learn how to position and shoot kind of the gaps and formations that I can put skirmishes in to maximize the number of models that get to shoot. It's a huge change to all of this, especially the part about crossing over terrain. Like terrain blocking line of sight is wildly different and very exciting.
Yeah, agreed. I do love the fact that we might actually have relevant terrain and we might need to consider the terrain we put on tables. I'm of the opinion that hills are now like the bee's knees for so many armies. And I would love it if the vast majority of, maybe if you go to an event, one side of the table has a hill, one side doesn't. And so rolling off to see who gets what side, getting the hill or denying it to your opponent who, might have a bunch of artillery is just a really impactful part of the game. That would be so sick to me.
That's pretty cool.
But we're going to be jumping down to the next section. And sorry, unless you guys have anything else to add.
Negative.
Beautiful. Troop types at a glance. Now, this is all pretty self-explanatory. A monster is a monster. A chariot is a chariot. Infantry, cavalry, all that good stuff. But the troop type table actually is something we need to break down. So this denotes the maximum rank bonus, the models per rank that you have to achieve that rank bonus, and the unit strength per model. So this is saying that, so just as an example, regular infantry have to have 5 models in a rank to be able to qualify for a rank bonus, and the maximum they can get is +2, as Peter already said before. +2 is the most you'll ever get for a rank bonus, so it's 2 or less essentially. Heavy infantry and monster infantry can also get +2. Everything else is +1 at best, so that is all forms of cavalry. And then unit strength per model. Now, unit strength is something we're going to unpack quite a bit because there's quite a few things that key off unit strength, especially as we just saw with disrupting. Also, fear and terror keys off a lot of unit strength, and there is quite a lot of fear and terror. Some armies that have it on every single model in their army, and so this is always going to be something you have to be cognizant of. So big things to note here: light cavalry need to be heavy infantry need to be 4 wide, monstrous infantry need to be 3 wide. Regular infantry is 4 wide. Swarms, who cares? Do whatever you want. You're a swarm, good for you. And unit strength is essentially 1 unless you're monstrous. And essentially, if you have 3 wounds or more, you count as unit strength 3. And that's the way I've seen it so far. If you have 2 wounds, which is a lot of cavalry, some cavalry models, or whatever. But light cavalry have to have 5 models in a rank to generate a rank bonus of +1 at a minimum, and they count as unit strength 2 per model. Heavy cavalry is 2 as well, and as soon as we get to monstrous cavalry, it's 3 wide. Heavy cavalry was 4 wide, and then they are 2 and 3 respectively. And then monsters, of course, there's no ranks to talk about there, but their unit strength is their starting wounds. is their unit strength. So usually it's 5 or more for a monster. I think the minimum wounds I've seen on a monster is 5, which I think is good, seeing as a cannon can only do maximum of 4 wounds. Sorry, am I speaking out of turn there, or is there some 4 wound monsters out there?
The Tomb Scorpions are 4 wounds. They're monstrous
Oh,
creature.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair. I would consider them to be like the smallest or the smallest version of monsters. So that's pretty applicable. Yeah, that's fair. I suppose I was thinking of behemoths. I was thinking more of you giants.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
No,
so
yeah, behemoths
in my head,
they're big boys, Adam.
You're absolutely correct. So I was thinking of behemoths, and I was talking about monsters. Unit strength. Danny, read this out for people because this is pretty important. And
sure.
Tell us this is an impactful part of the game.
So unit strength is basically how big your unit is. This is a size, obviously, unit strength. Well, it's a size comparison. So like infantry models are usually unit strength 1, bigger models are more unit strength. Cavalry are 2 because there's a horse and a dude. But to determine unit strength, simply count the number of models in the unit and multiply this by its unit strength per model as shown by the troop type table. So like if you have a unit of 20 normal infantry or regular infantry, unit strength 20. If you have 20 monstrous infantry in a unit somehow, you're going to have unit strength 60. So there's a big difference between those two things. And unit strength matters in a bunch of different ways. Unit strength matters specifically for causing disruption. So unit strength 5 being the break point for that. In most situations, sometimes it's 10, like against heavy infantry. And so that it matters how big your unit is. The other thing unit strength really plays a large role into is fear and break tests. So fear tests for units that cause fear, if you have a higher unit strength than them, you can either make them not charge you if they fail a leadership test when they try and declare the charge, or if they're in combat with you already and you outnumber them, they have to make a fear test or be -1 to hit in close combat. Break tests matter a lot in this case because if you outnumber your opponent by double with unit strength and you break them, instead of if they fail the leadership check but aren't rolling above their normal leadership, normally you fall back in good order. However, if you outnumber them by a significant amount and instead of falling back in good order, they actually just flee. So it's like if they rolled higher than their leadership.
Yeah.
So that's why you need like some units with high unit strength so that you don't keep just like kind of pushing them back passively.
Exactly.
You actually are causing them to flee and you can run them down and kill the whole unit in one go.
So it seems like unit strength is pretty damn impactful from what you guys have been telling me. We know Tomb Kings cause fear, and maybe some other armies that we're not allowed to talk about just yet cause fear. How does that actually, what actually happens? What is that interaction?
Fear's pretty good, right?
Fear's pretty good. Way more.
If you outnumber your opponent, i.e., you have a higher unit strength than them, if they want to try and charge a unit that causes fear and they are subject to fear, they have to make a leadership test in order to do that.
Okay. And so one thing we should point out to people, and we are jumping the gun here. Generally speaking, the leadership is down, compared to previous editions. Like 8th edition, it just seemed like the entire game was leadership 10 rerollable. Everybody just the entire game. If not stubborn and steadfast. Was that a correct statement to say? Generally, it's down?
Outside of elves, pretty much, yeah. I think elves are the only army that has easy access to leadership 10. And maybe, is there another one?
There's actually 4 armies, I think, out of the 9 that are leadership 10 armies.
Wood elves, high elves.
Tomb Kings are leadership 10 on the general.
That makes sense.
Which matters a lot. And then dwarfs are leadership 10.
Oh, there you go. So it's literally just like greenskins.
Greenskins, Warriors of Chaos. Warriors of Chaos have to take a Chaos Lord or a Demon Prince to be leadership 9.
Yep.
Empire, they have to take the General to be leadership 9.
Or the Grandmaster, one of those two.
Or the Grandmaster, yeah. High Elves, Wood Elves both have like easy access to leadership 10.
Yeah.
Tomb Kings, is it just the Tomb King that's leadership 10?
Yeah, just the king.
Yeah. And then
so that's pretty fair across the board. So what you're saying is elves generally have it like on a hero or a not a lord level leadership 10, because that's what I've seen so far. You have to prince. Yeah. Oh well, then fair. Then that's pretty fair and even. Then if everyone's at lord level, character is the leadership 10 giver, and then everything else is, leadership 9 or worse. That feels pretty good. I mean, even leadership 9 seems relatively gate kept for a lot of armies. But so that's saying, that is to say that expanding upon the benefits of fear is that a lot of the time you will find people having to make leadership 8 rolls to pass their fear checks. So it's not just like an LD10 re-roll like it used to be, which was essentially just a negligible interaction. It was a waste of a die roll. But every time it did happen, you were like, yes, that's my 1 in 100 for this this calendar month.
The nice thing about it is it doesn't prevent you from getting it doesn't prevent you from charging like single models very much.
Yes,
which is pretty nice.
Yeah, often the giving a single model fear or terror now, other than like monsters, and even with monsters, it's more to make you immune to the other thing having fear rather than the other way around. That's why you're paying for it.
So
and also I would also say it's a little more rare to get rerolls against fear and terror.
Yeah, correct. And that's pretty much what I was getting at. Usually it's not going to be even an 8 rerollable unless there's some special, USR or whatnot. It's usually just going to be a straight 8 or a 9, and you either did or you didn't. But then there's some even worse, times when it's going to be a 7 or, who knows. But bringing it back to unit strength.
There's one other effect of fear too that we didn't talk about.
Yeah, they're -1 to hit.
Yeah, -1 to hit in combat. So if you already in combat with a fear causing unit, they outnumber you. Have to take a leadership test to not be -1 to hit.
Yep. I do like that a lot, and it's one of the reasons there that monstrous infantry or big gribblies that cause fear preying on small units is going to be a problem. Not that it wasn't a problem already, but here we are. So bring it back to unit strength. Is this a good mechanic to build into the game? Because it seems to be quite impactful.
Unit strength was something I was asking for back in 8th edition, because it was something we had in 6th and 7th, and I think prior. And it was always something I wanted because in 8th edition, one of the big penalties I found to taking things like monsters was that there was no unit strength anymore. So it was very hard for monsters to disrupt ranks or anything like that. Having unit strength come back, I think is a net positive across the board. I really love it.
I think so. And it's another little degree of complexity to add to the game, a little wrinkle that people can try and wield. Oh, this one shouldn't charge this one using strength's not high enough, but it can go after this one and do really well there. Or here is a break point. I'm in a high fear causing, meta, or most of my opponents have, armies that have good access to fear and terror. I should have, generally 10% bigger units than I think I need, stuff like that. But that is going to bring us to an end of this episode. We have stopped just before we get to the magic and how magic is used, but that is a very deep section of the game, and we're going to leave that and then probably do the strategy sequence, strategy phase, in our next episode. Hopefully, guys have really enjoyed this deep dive into the kind of the guiding principles of the old world. But gentlemen, any lasting things you want to leave people with before we should just tell them to absolutely definitely come and join us over a part 2? Who have you been listening to? What other old world content creators can we spruik? Can we, expound upon that people should go and give their time to?
I've been catching up on Square Based naturally. It's nice to listen to Val and Rob riff on some of the stuff. I've been liking Rob's riffs on the different army lists that he's been going through.
Yeah,
he had some takes that are interesting and different than mine.
Yeah, and bad.
I wasn't going to say that, but yeah, okay. I don't think that they're correct, but that's fine.
It's very early days, and people have had different amounts of times with different books. So we're not here to tell you that any content is bad, Danny.
I didn't say it was bad. I didn't say that.
Specifically said that Rob's choices for lists were bad. I heard you say it.
Yeah, Danny, you're evil. You're toxic element of the show. Peter's a beacon of hope and light.
I am. I am.
It's true. I'm sorry. My bad, guys. I apologize. Yeah. Rob, I wasn't trying to insult you if you ever.
He was.
Which I don't think he will.
He was trying to insult you. The person that said that was definitely doing it to insult you.
Peter, who have you been listening to?
It was Peter. Yeah, just be aware.
I mean, other than Square Based, because they're our friends, I've been picking up on Old Book of Grudges. They're a Total War streamer that has started doing a lot of videos on the the old world. They're really deep into it. They've got some interesting insights. It's always nice to see like people from like outside of the. I shouldn't say outside because I know that they played quite a bit of Warhammer Fantasy Battle 2, but like, and to see new blood talking about the miniature side of things, and the Mountain from Mini Wargaming has returned. And he's been doing a lot of interesting videos as well. Generally getting rules right, which is a big positive for Mini Wargaming. I think you guys
we cannot backhand at the same time as we fronthand, can we? That's just not part of the.
No, it's not. Well, listen,
both sides with this podcast.
Yeah, I've made enough rules mistakes myself to last a lifetime. But still, I'm like really excited about like the amount of engagement we're getting from people. Even just looking at metrics on the like handful of articles I've done on Goonhammer, the amount of people that are intrigued with Old World and reading these things and watching is awesome. I'm so excited.
Well, I was watching the Mountain's latest live battle report. Him and Luca. It was Beastmen versus Dwarves, and they had 1,300 like live viewers. And I was like, "That's awesome! Geez, that's amazing. That is so good to see." So go over there and check out some of that stuff as well. I've also been very, very pleased that the Dwellers Below have returned. One of the very first podcasts. One of the very first podcasts I ever like listened to for Warhammer Fantasy. I adore those guys. I adore what they did, and legit, those are my first fanboy moments. I hit up David Drury, who's one of the hosts there. He's got very long hair now, living in the UK. And I was like, "Yo, are you bringing the Dwellers back?" And then the next week, the Dwellers were back. So I didn't have anything to do with it. They were doing it anyway. But I was just so freaking stoked to see that they came back, because they're some of my favorite dudes, especially the fact that they're Australians and they do hilarious and poignant content. They're a full spectrum show. They've got all the crunchies, deep diving, top level play, and they're also just a bunch of miscreant, hilarious personalities. So go over and give them some love too. And Square Based all the way. I am a patron of Square Based. You should be too. And if you're not of theirs, you should be of ours, or both. Definitely both. So thank you so much for joining us on this very first fully fledged episode. Part 2 of this episode will be being recorded directly following this, and you can find that over at Patreon / I can't remember which one it is. That Old World Charm. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. You've done a great job. And we will see you on part 2. Lads, say your customary goodbyes.
Thanks.
Bye.
You've been listening to That Old World Charm with those charming chaps, Adam, Danny, and Peter the Falcon. Thanks ever so much. Cheerio.